Imagine building a code so complex, so mathematically brilliant, that you believe no one on Earth could ever break it. For 4 long years, you send your most secret commands, battle plans, and intelligence reports using this code, confident in your security. But the entire time, your enemies are reading every single word, and you never even realize it. This isn't a spy thriller. It's the incredible true story of the Enigma machine. On July 8, 1941, the German Navy sent a message using their Enigma machine. To them, it was a meaningless jumble of letters, a secret locked away by a device they considered mathematically unbreakable. But hundreds of miles away, at a secret estate in England called Bletchley Park, that same message was being read in plain. Simply, here man. This single event was the culmination of a decade of hidden intellectual warfare. Throughout the entire Second World War, the German High Command remained blissfully unaware that their most private communications were an open book to the Allies. How was this possible? How did the Allies pull off the greatest intelligence coup in history? To find the answer, we have to go back, not to the fields of France or the skies over Britain, but to a quiet office in Warsaw, Poland, in 1932. The story of Enigma's defeat doesn't begin with Alan Turing, as many believe, but with 3 brilliant Polish mathematicians, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Roicki, working for the Polish Cipher Bureau. They were the first to truly understand the machine, using a combination of advanced mathematics, intercepted German signals, and crucial intelligence documents stolen by a French spy. They achieved the impossible. Rejewski was the one who first cracked the Enigma's internal wiring. He used group theory, a branch of abstract algebra, to map out the machine's complex scrambler system. It was a monumental intellectual leap. Based on this breakthrough, the Polish team built the very first code-breaking machine, which they called the bomba kryptologiczna, or the cryptographic bomb. This electromechanical device could rapidly cycle through the Enigma's settings, finding the correct key of the day. For nearly 7 years before the war even started, the Poles were quietly reading German military traffic. They knew what Germany was planning, testing, and building. But by 1939, the situation was desperate. The Germans were constantly making Enigma more complex, and the Polish team knew they were running out of time and resources. As the storm clouds of invasion gathered, they made a decision that would change the course of history. In a secret meeting just outside Warsaw in July 1939, a few weeks before the German invasion, the Poles shared everything they had with their British and French allies. They handed over replica Enigma machines, blueprints for their bomba, and a complete rundown of their methods. It was an act of incredible generosity and foresight. They knew Poland was doomed, but they wanted to give the world a fighting chance. This Polish gift was the seed from which the entire British code-breaking effort at Bletchley Park would grow. Without the foundational work of Rejewski and his team, the British effort would have been years behind, if it succeeded at all. With this vital information in hand, Britain secretly transformed Bletchley Park, a Victorian country mansion, into the nerve center of its intelligence war. It became a factory for breaking codes, housing thousands of the country's brightest minds, linguists, and even crossword puzzle champions. Among them was a young, eccentric genius from Cambridge University named Alan Turing. Turing immediately recognized the brilliance of the Polish bomba, but also saw its limitations. The German military was constantly upgrading their Enigma procedures, making the original Polish methods obsolete. Turing's revolutionary idea was to build upon the Polish design, creating a much larger, faster, and more powerful machine. This new device, which the British simply called the bomb, wasn't designed to find the Enigma's key directly. Instead, it was designed to find contradictions. The Codebreakers would make a logical guess about a piece of the original message. A crib, like weather report, or Heil Hitler. The bomb would then test thousands of possible Enigma settings per minute, searching for a configuration that didn't result in a logical contradiction. When it found one, it would stop giving the analysts a tiny handful of possible keys to test by hand. It was a triumph of engineering and logic. By mid-1940, Turing's bombs were operational, and Bletchley Park was decoding thousands of German Army and Air Force the Luftwaffe messages. Every single day, this intelligence, codenamed Ultra, gave the Allies an almost supernatural advantage. They knew about bombing raids before they happened, about troop movements before they began. It was instrumental in the Battle of Britain and the war in North Africa. But there was one major problem. The German Navy, die Kriegsmarine, their Enigma procedures were far more secure. They used extra rotors and a more complex key-setting process, making their codes a black hole for Bletchley Park. The Allied convoys crossing the Atlantic were being hunted and sunk by German U-boats, and Winston Churchill knew that if they couldn't break the naval code, Britain could be starved into submission. The Battle of the Atlantic was a battle they were losing. The breakthrough came not from a mathematical equation, but from the chaos of naval combat. On May 9, 1941, the British Royal Navy forced a German submarine, Uno Zero, to the surface. In their haste to abandon the sinking vessel, the German crew failed to destroy their secret materials. British sailors boarded the U-boat and captured a priceless treasure, a working Enigma machine, its rotors, and most importantly, the codebooks for the next several weeks. It was a missing piece of the puzzle, with the physical machine and the daily keys. The Codebreakers at Bletchley Park could finally understand the intricate workings of the naval Enigma. They reverse engineered the naval machine's wiring, and within weeks, Turing and his team had adapted their bombs to handle the new complexity. Suddenly, the lights came on. The Allies could now read the U-boat commands, signals to its wolf. They knew where the submarines would be and could reroute convoys around them or send hunter-killer groups to intercept them. The tide of the Battle of the Atlantic began to turn. Historians estimate that breaking the naval Enigma shortened the war by at least 2 years and saved countless lives. Yet, through all of this, the Germans never suspected. They had been so convinced of Enigma's mathematical invincibility that they blamed spies or simple bad luck for their failures. The idea that their code had been comprehensively broken was simply unthinkable to them. The secret of Bletchley Park was kept so tightly that its full story was unrevealed until decades after the war. The men and women who worked there, who had changed the course of history, were bound to secrecy and took their incredible stories to the grave. Breaking of the Enigma is more than just a story of a clever machine. It's a testament to international cooperation, from the crucial groundwork laid by the Poles to the industrial-scale effort of the British. It's a story of how abstract mathematics and logical deduction became powerful weapons of war. And at its heart, it's a story about the quiet, hidden heroes, the Codebreakers whose intellectual brilliance in the shadows of Bletchley Park gave the Allies the winning edge. So, how did a simple weather report from a captured U-boat turn the tide of World War II? It handed British Codebreakers at Bletchley Park the final key they desperately needed. From that moment on, the Allies could read thousands of German military messages every single day. This incredible intelligence was given a top-secret codename, Ultra. And Ultra became the Allies' most powerful, most secret weapon. Imagine being able to see every move your enemy makes before they make it. That's what Ultra gave them. They knew the routes German U-boats would take, allowing them to steer convoys to safety. They knew the German Navy's battle plans, the locations of deadly minefields, and even the private thoughts and complaints of high-ranking officers. It was a complete, real-time look inside the German war machine. The impact was immediate and devastating for Germany. The Battle of the Atlantic, once a slaughterhouse for Allied shipping, began to swing dramatically in their favor. Winston Churchill himself, the British Prime Minister, made no secret of its importance after the war. He stated unequivocally, "It was thanks to Ultra that we won the war." He knew that this silent, invisible weapon had saved countless lives and shortened the conflict by years. Yet, on the other side of the English Channel, the man in charge of the U-boat fleet, Admiral Karl Dönitz, remained completely in the dark. He saw his submarines being hunted down with terrifying precision, his carefully laid plans falling apart one after another. But he never once suspected the truth. He never imagined that his unbreakable Enigma code had been shattered. Instead, he blamed everything else. Improved Allied radar, sheer bad luck. even spies within his own ranks. The one thing he couldn't fathom was that the British were reading his mail. This brings us to one of the most fascinating psychological aspects of the entire war. Germany's fatal blindness. Despite a mountain of evidence pointing to a catastrophic security breach, the German high command refused to believe their Enigma machine could be broken. It was a masterpiece of German engineering, a testament to their mathematical prowess. To them, it was simply invincible. In 1943, a Swiss intelligence report actually reached Berlin, explicitly warning them that the Allies seemed to know their every move with uncanny accuracy. How did Admiral Dönitz react? He dismissed it out of hand. The report's conclusion was, in his words, impossible. Their unwavering faith in the perfection of their own technology blinded them to the possibility of human ingenuity and perseverance. They were so certain of their machine's superiority that they could unsee the disaster unfolding right in front of them. The greatest intelligence failure of World War II wasn't a mechanical flaw. It was a failure of belief, a crippling arrogance. When you look closer, you see this wasn't just about one machine. It was about two completely different cultures, two opposing mindsets, clashing on a global scale. On one side, you had Nazi Germany. Their culture worshipped engineering, perfection, and precision. It was hierarchical, rigid, and actively discouraged dissent or questioning authority. They believed they had achieved the pinnacle of technical design, and there was no room for doubt. On the other side, you had Bletchley Park in Britain. It was the complete opposite. It was a chaotic, brilliant, melting pot of free-thinking individuals. You had mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, and crossword puzzle experts all thrown together. It was a place that thrived on creative, unconventional problem-solving. Eccentricity wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. They were skeptical, curious, and relentlessly challenged every assumption. The British weaponized doubt, turning it into a tool to pry open Germany's secrets. Meanwhile, the Germans turned their own certainty into a self-laid trap. Let's take a closer look at the people inside Bletchley Park. This wasn't a typical military operation. The heroes of this story weren't soldiers on the front lines, but academics in tweed jackets. Alan Turing is the most famous, of course, a genius mathematician whose theoretical work laid the foundation for modern computing. But he was just one of many. There was Dilly Knox, a classicist who looked like a dusty old professor but had a mind like a steel trap for patterns. And Joan Clark, a brilliant cryptanalyst who had to fight against the sexism of the era to get the recognition she deserved. These people weren't motivated by rigid orders. They were driven by intellectual curiosity and a deep sense of purpose. They worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and the thrill of the chase, trying to find that one tiny crack in Enigma's armor. Their collaborative, open-minded approach was the secret ingredient that the Germans, with their top-down authoritarian system, could never replicate. Contrast that with the German communications staff. They were trained to follow procedures to the letter. Don't question, just execute. This rigidity became a fatal weakness. For example, some German operators got lazy. They'd use predictable keys, like their girlfriend's initials, or simple keyboard patterns, like QWRTY. Some would even transmit the same test message every morning. Each one of these small human errors was a gift to the Codebreakers at Bletchley Park. They called them Crib's little snippets of predictable text that gave them a foothold to attack the daily key. The German belief in the machine's perfection made them careless about the human element. The British, on the other hand, knew that systems are only as strong as the people who operate them. They exploited not just the machine's vulnerabilities, but the predictable, fallible nature of the humans using it. So, what's the ultimate lesson here? It's that wars aren't just won with tanks and planes. They are won with information, with psychology, and with culture. The Enigma story is the perfect example. Germany had a brilliant machine, but their rigid mindset was their undoing. The Allies had a team of eccentric geniuses who weren't afraid to think differently, to question everything, and to collaborate in ways the Germans couldn't imagine. They proved that human creativity can overcome mechanical complexity. The legacy of Bletchley Park isn't just about a broken code. It's about the birth of the digital age, the dawning of artificial intelligence, and a powerful reminder that the most dangerous weakness is the refusal to believe you can be wrong. It's a story of how a group of puzzle solvers, working in secret in the English countryside, truly changed the course of history. We've talked about the genius, the machines, and the incredible breakthroughs, but now we need to confront the darkest side of this story. The moral price of secrecy. To protect Ultra, to keep the Germans from ever suspecting that Enigma was compromised, the Allies had to make unimaginable choices. They often had to let attacks happen. Think about that. They knew a convoy was sailing into a U-boat wolf pack. They knew a city was about to be bombed. But if they suddenly diverted every ship or evacuated every town, the Germans would know something was wrong. They would change the Enigma, and the window into their plans would slam shut. The advantage would be lost, potentially prolonging the war by years. So, they played a horrifying game of percentages. They would save one convoy, but let another one get hit. They would subtly strengthen the air defenses of a city, but couldn't just tell everyone to leave. This wasn't a decision made once. It was a constant, agonizing calculation. The lives of soldiers, sailors, and civilians became numbers in a terrible equation, weighed against the millions more who might die as the city cut out. The most infamous example is the bombing of Coventry in 1940. Churchill knew an attack was coming, but revealing the extent of that knowledge could have compromised the entire Ultra operation. It's a brutal example of the burdens of leadership in wartime. And this burden wasn't just carried by Churchill or the generals. It was carried by thousands of ordinary people. At its peak, Bletchley Park and its outstations employed around 10,000 people. And here, as a fact, that was overlooked for far too long. About 80% of them were women. They were the ones operating the bombs, translating the intercepts, and piecing together the vast mosaic of German military operations. For decades, they were bound by the Official Secrets Act. They couldn't tell their parents, their spouses, or their children what they did during the war. They saw their male colleagues celebrated as heroes, while their own contributions, which were just as vital, remained completely invisible. They went to their graves with their secrets, their names unknown, their monumental achievements locked away in classified files. This wall of silence held for almost 30 years after the war ended. The public knew nothing of Enigma, the bombs, or Bletchley Park. It wasn't until 1974, when a former RAF officer named F.W. Winterbotham published his book, The Ultra Secret, that the story finally broke. The world was stunned. The Germans were in disbelief. Imagine being a high-ranking German officer, someone like Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the head of the U-boat fleet. He had been so confident in Enigma's security. He'd sent thousands of men to their deaths in the Atlantic, believing his communications were secure. When he finally learned the truth, his reported reaction was one of quiet devastation. It simply said, then everything we did was for nothing. All their tactics, all their plans, all their sacrifices all laid bare for their enemies to see. Now, let's talk about the legacy. Because what happened at Bletchley Park didn't just end with the war. It fundamentally reshaped the future. The work of Alan Turing, in particular, was revolutionary. His concepts of a universal machine, a device that could be programmed to solve any computable problem, weren't just theoretical anymore. The bomb was a special-purpose machine, but the ideas behind it and the electronic computer, Colossus, which was built to break the even more complex Lorentz cipher, with the direct ancestors of the device you're watching this on right now. Turing's wartime innovations became the very foundation of modern computer science and artificial intelligence. Historians have debated the impact of Ultra ever since the secret came out. The consensus is staggering. Most estimates suggest that breaking the Enigma code shortened World War II by at least 2 to 4 years. 2 to 4 years, in a conflict that was killing tens of thousands of people every single day. The number of lives saved is almost impossible to comprehend, likely running into the millions. It saved countless ships in the Battle of the Atlantic, allowed the Allies to outmaneuver Rommel in North Africa, and provided crucial intelligence for the D-Day landings. Without Ultra, the outcome of the war, or at least its duration and cost, would have been drastically different. The story of Ultra also leaves us with powerful, timeless lessons that echo through history and are more relevant today than ever. The first and most obvious lesson: no system is unbreakable. The Germans had absolute, unwavering faith in their technology. They believed Enigma was invincible. That arrogance, that certainty, was their greatest weakness. It teaches us that in cybersecurity, in intelligence, in any field, you must never assume you are perfectly secure. There is always a vulnerability, a human error, a flaw waiting to be exploited. The second lesson is that secrecy is a double-edged sword. It is an immense source of power. The ability to know your enemy's every move while they know nothing of yours is the ultimate strategic advantage. But as we saw, it's also a profound moral burden. The choices it forces upon you can be monstrous. The weight of what you know and what you can't reveal can crush individuals and haunt nations for generations. And finally, the third lesson. Intelligence can shape the outcome of wars just as much as tanks, planes, and battleships. This wasn't just a war of machines. It was a war of information, a war of wits. The side that could learn faster, adapt quicker, and think more creatively was the side that would ultimately win. Which brings us to the final, most crucial point. In the end, the battle for the Atlantic, the war in the desert, the entire conflict, it wasn't lost by Germany because their machines failed. Their Enigma machines were technological marvels. They worked flawlessly, exactly as designed. The Germans didn't lose to superior firepower alone, or to a better machine. They lost to a better way of thinking. They lost to thought itself. Their fatal flaw wasn't in their engineering. It was in their assumptions. They assumed their code was unbreakable. They assumed their enemies couldn't possibly be as clever as they were. They assumed their system was perfect, and they stopped questioning it. The British, on the other hand, never stopped questioning. They were faced with a problem that seemed impossible, but they didn't accept that. They doubted. They experimented. They brought together a diverse team of classicists, mathematicians, and crossword puzzle champions. They tried unconventional ideas. They failed, and they tried again. They embraced uncertainty and used it as a starting point for discovery. This is perhaps the ultimate lesson of Bletchley Park. It's a message that applies far beyond war and espionage. In intelligence, as in science, as in life, progress doesn't begin with certainty. Progress begins where certainty ends. It starts with the humility to admit you might be wrong, and the curiosity to find out what's right. That was the real secret weapon that won the war. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey into one of history's greatest secrets. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.